Hey everyone, this is Josh from Solopreneur Grind for episode 119 of the Solopreneur Grind podcast. I'm here with Rob Barrett. Rob, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
It is my absolute pleasure, Josh. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, Rob. Could we start just with a quick intro? Love to hear a little bit more about you and what you're working on these days.
Yeah, so first of all, it's a pleasure to be on episode 119. That to me now is a special number. I appreciate that. I am a former construction professional from the UK turned entrepreneur. So I trained as a quantity surveyor, became chartered, got a master's in law, moved across the world to work on huge projects in Asia, and then took a complete right turn and went into the crazy, risky, and very, very fun world of entrepreneurship.
Right. So where were you at, Rob? Like what age, what part of your life were you at when you decided to make that shift? And maybe take us through the thought process. Was it a certain trigger? What was it that caused the change?
It's a really good question, and it's something that I think about a lot, actually. I think it wasn't just one thing that sort of made me take that leap. And I think that has got to be true for most people that do something similar, where they go from a career to a kind of starting out to do something on your own. I think there has to be like a few things that kind of push you over the edge rather than just one kind of major life event. So for me, I would say kind of the major things were definitely, I felt like I'd kind of reached a bit of a glass ceiling. I had a really fantastic job. I had a wonderful salary. I worked with some really, really talented people, and I had a great boss. Those are all reasons to stay in a job, not leave one.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but I felt that like my future was kind of mapped out, and I wasn't necessarily excited about that. I wasn't excited about where that journey was going to take me. I didn't really want to do my boss's job when he retired, which was kind of the natural progression for where I was going. I was still learning, but kind of that inflection of where you learn a huge amount at the start of your career had gone. So I'd learned an awful lot, and it was in, a great kind of managerial role, but I felt like I wasn't learning at the same rate. And I also found that outside of work, I just wasn't really that interested about thinking about work. And, popular wisdom tells you, well, that's a good thing. You need to switch off. But for me, I want to be curious constantly about what it is I'm doing and how I can be better, how I can improve. And I'd spent, my 20s doing that. I'd done a degree, I'd done a master's, I'd got chartered, I'd become a fellow of another institution. I'd basically got all the letters that I could possibly get after my name and really tried to go as far as I could in the career. But then I just kind of realized that, well, okay, what's the next step here? What does this look like? What do I want for my future? So that was definitely, a couple of things in there. And I think just as an industry for me, construction, it was fantastic to me. It took me around the world, but I felt like I was seeing the same problems on projects every time. I'd go to a new project and the issues would be the same. It'd just be the place you were working in was different. And to me, it was frustrating because I feel like, there's so much room, and I always read that industry is ripe for disruption, and it is, but it's going to take years. It's really going to take systemic change at government levels around the world to really make big improvements in the way that construction projects are run. So that was kind of another thing for me. It was like, okay, well, what kind of industry do I want to be in? So then I started to get a bit more curious about doing different things. So yeah, I would say like those were the two kind of major things that pushed me into sort of making a big change. And then, yeah, like I just started to get curious about other stuff and just start having those conversations. And I'm a big believer that once you kind of put that out there in the world, that maybe you're looking for a change, or maybe you're looking for something else, you just start reading different books perhaps, or you start looking at different websites and think, that's interesting. Like, I wonder why that exists, or I wonder how that seems to happen. You start to then bring that out into the world and have the conversations with people that you might not have had 12 months ago. And it leads to different places. And that's exactly what happened to me. It took me down kind of an entrepreneurial route.
Right. And so why do you think, so first of all, I'd love to hear what happened next from those conversations and that new research. But was it an easy decision to kind of go down the entrepreneurial route? Were you at all thinking about, hey, maybe I'll just get a new job in a different industry? Or from the outset, was it kind of, you know what, I want to do something on my own?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there was that option to go and retrain and do something in a different industry. The problem was I didn't really know what. I just knew that I was getting interested in different things and interested in the world of entrepreneurship, whatever that means, right? Because there's millions of different options, millions of different routes you can take. But for me, I think I was just open to opportunity. I just kept my ears very much open to the right conversation with the right person or the right opportunity. And that actually turned out in the unlikeliest of places. I was talking to a friend. So I was living in Hong Kong at the time, and I was talking to a friend who happened to live on the same street. And we went for a hike, and he'd just been to New York, and he was saying, how great it was there, and the food was fantastic. And it was kind of really easy to go out and get great sandwiches, great bagels. And why didn't that really exist in Hong Kong? And I said, well, this is the kind of thing that it's crying out for here. Someone should do that. And then roll forward 6 months, we'd done it. And we kind of just really dove into that. And it was a crazy experience because it's not the kind of thing that I would recommend to everyone. It's not for the faint of heart. I didn't set out with a plan sitting in a construction office thinking, one day I want to open a restaurant. I just was kind of open to the opportunity of potentially doing that. So, the long story short is we opened it. We were really successful. Within 2 years, we'd sold that. And then I was like, okay, what next? So I think I just kind of took the first most interesting path that I could rather than deliberately sought out a new career. I was just deliberately looking for the right opportunity that kind of excited me and lit me up.
Got it. And for that business, did you quit your job? Like, what was the decision making and steps? When did you kind of find that opportunity and say, okay, time to leave my job? Did you start that restaurant while still keeping your full-time job? What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer if you're going to do something, I guess you and your listeners have kind of heard the expression, if you want to take the island, you've got to burn the boats. So I go all in. So, I left my job and decided that, I'm going to pursue this. This is something we're really going to do. And I like to think that one of the reasons we were so successful is that we did everything right. We made sure that we kind of got the right people involved and we learned the right things. So we went to New York and, like in this example, learned how to make bagels in a kosher culinary center. And then we came back and partnered with chefs, and we got the right architects on board to design the shop out and make it feel like we wanted for people to, to have that same experience that we knew we wanted to give. So yeah, I think for me, it was a case of, you just have to go all in and throw everything at it. And, if you fail then, and it's kind of the way I've been brought up, but if you fail, well, at least you gave everything. I think if you to look back and fail and say, well, I could probably have done that better, or I should have done that, which I think is worse, then yeah, you've only really got yourself to blame.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So Rob, you sell that, that's a success. What happened next?
Yeah. So I just kept on turning. Like everyone said to me, "Oh, are you going to open a new restaurant?" I was like, "Well, I've just sold one. I don't need to open another one. I think I'm really looking to do something that, again, it interests me. But what I wanted to do this time was to be more deliberate. So one of the questions you asked me is, why didn't you just change industries? Why didn't you just change careers? Or, what you could have started a business doing something very, very specific. What I did in that instance was I kind of took the opportunity that sounded interesting to me and went with it. But this time I said, okay, now I kind of know what I want from a business and what I don't want. And what I want from a business was freedom and flexibility, the ability to be able to work anywhere. I wanted to, it sounds kind of cliche, but I wanted to be able to help people on a bigger scale. So, as a restaurant, you're helping people in a particular neighborhood or in a particular city, but I wanted to be able to do something that actually would help people on a much, much bigger scale. So I knew that I had to do something online. I knew I had to get an online business created. And I did have a few ideas, and I really kind of crafted one. I had one, the seed of one was planted when I was working on construction projects. I'd seen this big need for people, for professionals to be able to come in at very short notice as consultants and do some work on construction projects, and often there just isn't the talent there in that city, or it's not available at kind of the volume that's needed. So I thought, okay, brilliant. I'm going to create an online marketplace. I mean, I'd never done it before, but I was like, well, how hard can it be? I mean, the answer is very hard, but I thought, well, yeah, this is something I've got to do. So I really started to investigate that, put a lot of work into it, and then launched that business. And then that's when you really find out, okay, if you're going to do anything online, you need to have either the right connections, which basically is leveraging influence. Either you need to have a huge community already, that definitely helps, or you need to have very, very deep pockets to spend a ton on marketing. And I would say 99.9% of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs don't have a clue what they're doing when it comes to marketing. Everybody I guess you included at some point, Josh, I know I have spent money on Facebook or Instagram or Google Ads, not really knowing what you're doing. Maybe you get a decent return on it, but most of the time you just get, a nice pretty report that tells you how many impressions and engagements you got. Maybe you were lucky and someone filled out a web form or even called you. But for most people, I think they just burn cash. And that's definitely something I did. It did not work out for me at all. So yeah, that business actually morphed into something else. But I mean, I'll let you jump in here with a question because I feel like I've talked a lot there.
Yeah, I mean, you say a lot that I can definitely relate to. I think especially when you're talking about a marketplace, which is double-sided, meaning you got to do double the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And keep them both kind of like close enough so that one side doesn't drop off. So you definitely gave yourself quite the challenge. So what ended up happening with that, Rob? And I guess the other question that pops into my head is, at what point did you realize, okay, this isn't working, let's pivot, or whatever you want to call it that you ended up doing?
So that business, I put an awful lot of thought into it. And then we registered and started the business. I think it was on something like the 16th of March, 2020, which was not a great time to launch a business.
Yeah.
I couldn't go and shake hands with people at networking events. I was picking up the phone to call people, and obviously they weren't in the office. And then you were trying to get hold of them by mobile, and it was just a disaster, like in terms of marketing and in terms of like outreach to people. So then, I spent a fortune on ads. That didn't work, and I thought, well, what can I do here? Like right now, like the world is kind of against me, but I still need to get my name out here. And it was actually a stroke of luck. Like an old business acquaintance just got in touch with me and said, "Hey, listen, I've just done an interview with this platform. Do you want me to recommend you? Like this could be something that you might be interested in." So I did it, and once I'd done the interview, I just posted it on LinkedIn and kind of showed people that, hey, I've just been interviewed about this platform. This was cool. Hope you like it. And the response was amazing. Like people started to get in touch with me, like, oh, that's really interesting. I haven't spoken to you for a while. What are you up to now? What are you doing? It kind of like lit the fire for people. Like it put me back in front of them and like back top of mind. So then I thought, that's interesting. Like that's a really interesting concept. And it actually helped me as a solopreneur at the time to get the word out about my business. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Like maybe I should do that to try and promote my own business right now, the marketplace. So I started to reach out to people in the construction and real estate industry and then just interview them. People that I found interesting or people that were particularly influential. I just reached out to them, asked them if they wanted to be interviewed, if I could share their story so that they could then help other people in the industry. Their insights and their experience might help other people, which is generally the case. People are often interested in other people that are further ahead or further down the road than them because they want to get there faster. So the response to that was great. I started to interview them. I started to publish those interviews. I write blogs around it. And then all of a sudden, I was getting so much more traffic to that website than I was to my marketplace that just became the business. Like it was natural. I just followed the traffic and then followed the money because then people wanted to start paying to be on the website. They wanted to be interviewed by me. So it's a real journey. Like I always say to people that I kind of ended up running this business by accident, but I'm so glad I did. Like it's a happy accident. It's fun. I meet some amazing people. I'm really building a fantastic network of people all over the world that I wouldn't possibly have met by doing any other business. Definitely not the marketplace that I set up. So yeah, it was kind of a happy accident from going where I was planning to go to where I've ended up. But yeah, every day now, very cliche, but every day is just fun and it's different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also a great sales strategy in the sense that if you're struggling with sales for a business, start a podcast and interview the people you're trying to get those conversations with. Because ultimately, if you break down sales, you're building relationships and having conversations with people to try and hopefully provide them with value in exchange for money. And one good way to start those conversations is through a podcast. Don't worry, Rob, I'm not trying to sell you anything, but podcasting is a great way to network, right? So, especially coming from me, someone who's been doing it for quite a while. So, Rob, when you realized that there was traction with the podcasting stuff, and I love how you put it, kind of like following the money, following the traffic, that's usually how most of our guests end up finding that business that works, is not necessarily coming up with an idea, sitting in a room by yourself, and then going out to the world. It's usually going out to the world, doing a whole bunch of things, and then getting signals from the world that, hey, this is actually what people want. When you realize that, How did you, was that a separate business? Did you kind of completely shut down the other business in that brand and start a new business with a new brand? Like, what was that kind of transition like?
Yeah, it took a little while. I mean, obviously this didn't happen overnight. This took like a series of like months and months to kind of work out that, okay, this, like you say, I'm listening to the market signals. This actually is probably the way I should be going. So it was probably like 9 to 12 months before like I closed that original business down and then kind of ran with this other one. So I was definitely kind of juggling a couple of plates at once, but it was helping me in all kinds of different ways because I was learning a ton about how to set up a media website now. I was meeting some very, very interesting people, and then also kind of like really getting to grips with like, okay, well maybe this is like, I didn't want to just jump from one thing to another. I wanted to be very, very sure that where I was going was the right place for me, and also definitely from kind of a data-backed business perspective. But I just want to touch on something that you mentioned as well. You said, for business owners, like setting up a podcast is a great thing to do. I do agree with that, but I actually think there's something better. I think it's appearing on people's podcasts, like I'm doing now. Like it's just a brilliant way to kind of, you can leverage other people's network. You can obviously leverage their listeners, like people who follow your podcast may or may not have heard of me before. So this is a great chance for me to get the word out there. So if you've just launched your own clothing brand or you've just launched your own online B2C marketplace, like you should be looking to like, how can I leverage other people's network? How can I get the word out about my business on a budget? So I think it's very, very important for anyone who's thinking about starting a business, you should probably be starting to like look at what you can do in terms of getting the word out there before you even start. Maybe you can start blogging and showing your expertise around a particular subject. Maybe you can start getting interviewed to talk about this idea that you've got or to talk about your journey so far. All these things really add up, and definitely from an SEO perspective, like organically, if you can start a website 6 months or a year before you actually launch the business and start selling products, you're going to be in a much, much healthier place from a marketing perspective. And it's going to be much easier for you down the road for customers to find you and for you to grow quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great advice. Any tips for someone who does want to start getting on more podcasts? Is it as simple as Googling and reaching out, or what are some tips you would recommend?
There are a few ways you can do it. I think the easiest way is to leverage your existing network. So go through LinkedIn or Twitter, Facebook, whichever is your kind of platform of choice for where you spend the most time and where you interact with the most people. For me, that's LinkedIn. I think it's just such a valuable platform from that perspective. But go through your contacts and see who's doing this kind of stuff and see if they will have you as a guest. If they won't, what do they need in order for you to be on there? But I think like something that is even better and like helps to provide just that little bit of social proof that you actually know what you're talking about for anyone to take the chance on interviewing you in the first place is to blog. Just write a few blogs. The key is really showing what you know in that niche, in the niche that you're serving, and really trying to think about what your audience is looking for. What would your target customer be searching for on Google today? Answer that question and answer it with the best possible content, like on the internet. You really need to think in that way. If you're writing a blog, you need to remember that there are two types of content on the internet: absolutely fantastic content, and the rest. And the rest is rubbish. If everyone says the best place to hide a body is page 2 of Google. It's true. Like no one goes there. You need to be on page 1, and ideally you need to be in the top 3 spots. And if you can't get in the top 3 spots, get onto page 1. But that's been something that I've learned. Like I learned the hard way from that marketplace, and I've really pushed from our perspective. And it's actually now it's a service we offer. We help people they can write blogs with us and we publish them, so they get a backlink from us, which is vital for SEO. We'll find podcasts for them to be on. We'll even write their blogs for them if they want. And obviously we're using kind of expert copywriters. So those are the kind of things I would think about. I would think about marketing early, leveraging your network, and also just like really don't be afraid to put yourself out there in terms of your expertise through blogs or through social posts.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's great advice. And one thing I'll quickly add, because now I get reached out to, not a lot, but enough that I don't have to go looking for guests anymore, is reach out to people, keep it brief, and include links to those things that you just talked about, Rob. Kind of the best emails I get, whether it's from someone who wants to be a guest or maybe the agency they're working with, is just, hey, Josh, this is the person, this is what they do. one or two sentences. Here's a link to their blog or a link to a previous episode they've been on. What do you think? And that's usually enough for me to either make a quick decision or maybe send a few follow-ups and make sure that they're the right fit for the show. But just another tip more on the outreach side if anyone's thinking about doing that.
I like that. And I think that's a very, very good point, because, what you're talking about there is kind of like social proof. Like, why should I have this person on? Like, who are they? What do they mean to me? What might they mean to my listeners? How might they help them? And if there's nothing about you out there, like, that's a problem. One bit of advice that I give to a lot of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs starting out especially is Google yourself. Like, type in your name in Google and what comes up? Like, are you on the first page? If you're not, who is? Like, who's your namesake and what do they do and why are they there? I actually started something like a kind of a fun campaign around this. So I got the industry leaders is on the first page of Google. I think we're either the first or second result. If you type in industry leaders, we're right there. But I thought, I focus so much on the business and I focus so much on other entrepreneurs and getting them to page one and their businesses. I was like, well, what about me? I completely neglected my own personal brand. And I thought, well, that's stupid. I really should be focusing on that. So around about 2 months ago, I had this kind of epiphany moment and Googled my own name. So I just typed in Rob Barrett and I thought, okay, well, most of my customers now are in the US and the UK, also like North America and the UK. So I just switched my Google settings just to see what came up, ran that search on incognito. And it turns out there's a comedian called Rob Barrett in the UK who is quite popular in the southwest of England. He obviously has bought the name robbarrett.com, and that appears right now, or did, that appears at the top of page one of Google. So it's been my mission for the past couple of months just to overtake it personally. So like, it's kind of a fun thing to do because it keeps me constantly producing content. It keeps me pushing my own personal brand out there. But it's also like a very, very good social proof for people to say, well, like, this is why you should do it, because every month I'll take a screenshot and find out what's on page one this month. And I've already started to climb. I'm already there just from producing content and pushing it out through our website and doing interviews like this. So like, very soon I'm going to overtake that guy's website, and maybe I'll reach out and apologize. Maybe I'll go and see his comedy show and introduce myself. It'll be super weird. But I think that's that kind of thing. Like, when you, Josh, are receiving pitches from people, like, the first thing you're going to do is Google them or go on LinkedIn and have a look at them. So it's vital that if you're approaching a podcast or you want to get interviewed somewhere, that you've really got some sort of presence online. And that doesn't mean 20,000 or 200,000 followers. It just means that you can be seen as an expert in your field for what it is you want to speak about.
Absolutely. And the other little part, the last part I'll add is, I want to make sure that if someone's going to come on the show, especially as we're recording this with video, those listening might not be seeing us right now, but those watching on YouTube I want to make sure that the guest is going to show up and they have a decent webcam and they have a decent mic and their sound quality, you know what I mean? Because we've had scenarios where that hasn't been ideal. So even just one previous episode that you were on where someone could see you clearly, hear you clearly, it goes a long way for someone evaluating whether to have someone on the show. So anyways, so Rob, this is really helpful. So once you started getting traction, that those 9-12 months went by, you were like, okay, this is kind of it. Let's get rid of the old one. Let's go all in on as Rob likes to do, go all in on what's working. What were those next few steps, or what's happened since then? How have things gone? Any bumps along the way?
I mean, as a solopreneur or entrepreneur, like, daily, there are things. The main bump for me is things just don't happen as fast as you want them to, right? Like, my to-do list never gets to done. Like, it's there is constantly stuff that's open on there. So I think that definitely is a source of frustration, but it's minor. Like, honestly, like, you could have told me 6-7 years ago, like, this is the life I'd be living right now, I'd have bitten your hand off. Like, I'm in a very, very lucky position. I'm really happy that I've got to this point just through curiosity. But in terms of like the path, I think there's a very clear progression. And this, again, I think is something that people should be taking notice of, because it's like the steps are the same. They're simple and it applies to whatever industry you're in. So the first thing I did was show my expertise in a particular subject. Then I started to find other people who knew about that subject as well, and then speak to them. And then you could literally just take their lessons and apply it to your own business or to your own career. But in my case, I did both. I used what they told me, but I also pushed it out so other people can learn as well. So I went from speaking to people in construction and real estate to marketing, to coaching, to finance, to even things like sexual health and wellness. Like we literally cover every single industry. So I started to speak to people in different industries, and then I've got a network. So one, I've showed my expertise and I put myself out there, which is the hardest thing to do. Then I started to build a network. And then once you start to build that network, it goes back to what you just said there, in the, like, you can Google someone and okay, yeah, they've got a little bit of X or Y in this industry. They know something. They've got a story to tell. Then you start to connect with more influential people. And that's what's really started to like push us further and further, like in terms of like domain score and in terms of like interest from other people, like either personally reaching out to me through LinkedIn or coming to the website and filling out the form and saying, listen, I want to learn more about this. I want to get published with you guys. I want to be on the website alongside Isabel Cowell, who went in 6 months from 0 followers on LinkedIn to being an influencer on there. And it is really going somewhere as a 21-year-old, like having just left university. Or I want to be alongside Nancy Duarte, who's a Silicon Valley CEO who we interviewed last year, and she has an amazing story. She set up a communications company with her husband, and it's wildly successful, but they had a lot of bumps along the way. That's the kind of thing, like once you start to put yourself out there, really amazing things happen, but you just need to make sure you do it. And then once you start to meet influential people, leverage that.
Yeah, it's such a great way of putting it. And I love how you kind of simplify it. I think business, and interested to hear if you agree, business is actually quite simple in terms of the couple steps you can take to reach success. The hard part is doing it and doing it consistently and adjusting along the way as the hard parts come along, as they inevitably do. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that, Rob. And then also, at what point did we start thinking about money, right? Because you start interviewing people and building your network. At what point did you start to kind of build products or services around that, if at all, or was it an advertising play, or how did the money come into the mix?
Well, I guess I'll start with that question first. Like, when did money start coming into play? Constantly, every day. Before I even started this website, when I was doing the marketplace, like money was always there, because I think like it's great to start something as a hobby, and ironically, that's what happened with me. But I think you've got to have your eye on a goal. You've got to be looking at like revenue. You've got to be thinking about how can I serve people in the best possible way with something that they want and need, but monetize that eventually. So yeah, I'm a big advocate for giving away something for free right at the start, working for free almost if you need to, if that's what helps open the door for you. But at some point, like, you need to put food on the table. So I think every entrepreneur needs that in the back of their mind. And I think every true entrepreneur does. Otherwise, you're a hobbyist. So I was always thinking about that. But in terms of like when industry leaders started to monetize, it was quite early, actually. And we did that through paid interviews at the start. People approached us. So we had PR agencies coming to us and saying, hey, listen, like, we'd really love to get the CEO of this business onto your website. How do we do that? So that was kind of the initial ads. Like, we kind of experimented with ads and placing them on the site. But honestly, I think I really learned a big lesson about the way the internet works. And for me, like, ads are fantastic if you are a huge business and maybe your content is either super viral and it's just a one-time look, and maybe people will come on and have a look at your website and like they maybe see one article they like and then click through onto an ad by accident, or not. Maybe they are served something that they actually genuinely want. But ads are an annoyance for most people, and I think people need to think about their websites as real estate. I like to think about my website as like it's either like I'm building like a city, and I've got networks running everywhere, and I want people to drive to my front door, which is the homepage or my about page or my products page. So in order to do that, like, I don't want to stuff my website with ads that take people to other places. I want to keep them on the website. So instead of where I placed ads for a couple of months when we were experimenting, I quickly learned that maybe I should be putting a link to another article that might be related to this one that's helpful to people. Or maybe I should be putting an image that will take people to my Get Published page, so they can become a member, and then they can start to get published themselves. And maybe we then can convert them into a customer. So I think that was definitely like a key lesson, is that like, yeah, you should keep money on the mind. But I think in terms of like your website as well, you really need to think of that as real estate, and you don't put a billboard for somebody else in your front garden if you're selling essentially the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you've got a product or service to sell. Maybe if you just have a pure content blog with no services to sell, that, maybe that would make more sense. But I
Mhm.
totally agree. So Rob, what does your day to day look like now? Like you said initially the goal was to build a company that, would provide you more freedom, location independence, all that kind of stuff. How do things look now? What's your day to day like? What's the fun stuff? What's the unfun stuff? Would love to hear about that.
Yeah, so day to day, so when I started the marketplace, I did that as a digital nomad. So I used to live in Hong Kong with my partner. Then once we'd sold the business, like we left, and then I was writing and also then setting up this business on the road. And then we kind of like zeroed in on Barcelona, Spain as somewhere that we might want to try and live in. So this is where we are right now. Like I work from home. My day to day is pretty cool, actually. Like I get up pretty early. I make sure I'm doing some kind of deep work in the morning. I also do some copywriting work for a company in the US as well, which I really enjoy. And that kind of helps people that are kind of further down the road, like businesses that are slightly bigger with slightly bigger budgets. So they don't need to necessarily worry so much about like the initial leverage, which is what the industry leaders helps with. So I feel like I'm helping entrepreneurs every day, like at different stages of the funnel. So like the industry leaders might help people with who are just starting out, or they're like less than 3 years in business and they're just starting to get like that steady revenue stream, and they want to start to really push to get found by people. And then the other side of it is that like the other part of my day is spent helping entrepreneurs that are maybe sort of 3 to 5 or sort of 5 to 10 years in, and they've got a steady revenue and they've got more marketing budget, and then we can then really use that to kind of help them spend that in the right way and drive even more leads and grow quickly. So
Right.
yeah, it's a busy day, but it's all wrapped around like online marketing, getting the word out there about your business, and really just helping entrepreneurs kind of like Monday to Friday, and sometimes Saturday, Sunday as well.
That sounds awesome. So Rob, you mentioned earlier in terms of great opportunities for marketing, especially at the beginning, getting on people's podcasts, blogging. Do you have maybe one or two other ways? Like what are some of the top opportunities for marketing a business right now? And I'll quickly date it. We're at the end of August 2022. If anyone's listening down the road, because we know how often these marketing things can change with all these social media platforms, et cetera. But yeah, any one or
Mhm.
two tips you would recommend for marketing a business right now?
All right, I'm gonna talk about this from someone who perhaps doesn't have a huge network of people, or didn't go to an Ivy League and just can't just call up a friend and be like, "Hey, I'm starting this business. Like, can you get me in front of a venture capital firm?" I'm going to talk about this for the 99% of entrepreneurs that start something and really aren't sure. So I think like it's August 2022 right now, but I think blogging is still important. It can cause people to run for cover and think, "Oh, I really don't want to do that. I don't know how to do it." But ultimately, like I think you need to be blogging because it makes you think about what your customers are searching for. So you don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily need to talk about a day in the life of X at your business, because probably most of your customers aren't interested in that. They just want to get their problem solved right now. And if you can't solve it, they're going to go find someone who can. So I think if you can start to think about common questions that people might Google, for example, about a product or service you're offering, if you can answer that question with a 1,500 word blog, put it on your website, or better yet, go and put it on somebody else's website who gets more traffic than yours, and then they can link back to your website. That will push you up Google's rankings. It's like the online equivalent of getting someone throwing a life ring to you from the ship or from the top of the cliff. Like they'll pull you up. So if you can get published on a website that gets more traffic than yours, do it. Podcasting or getting interviewed, because there are more ways than just podcasts to get interviewed. Obviously, people do written interviews, or you can do like YouTube stuff as well. So I think that's definitely worth something looking at. I know I'm a huge advocate of podcasts. I really do love them as a way to get found and to talk about what you know and just leverage people. I really do. I mean that. And I don't want that to come across as like you're using people. I don't think that's what this is about. I think if you can leverage someone who's more influential, if you can leverage their network, you want to do it in a way where it comes from a good place. So you're actually helping that influencer. So for example, if you are starting a cosmetics company, maybe you've seen someone that's already got a cosmetics company and, they're not like Unilever, but like they're doing great business on Etsy, and maybe they've got 20, 30,000 followers on Facebook or Instagram. Reach out to them. And like, if there's something that if there's something that you've seen on their profile or their website that either interests you or you think, actually, maybe you could do this better, tell them, like actually offer that value to them. And then you start to build up a relationship with them. And it does happen. I've done it myself. I'm still doing it. I like doing it every week. If you reach out to those people and you can demonstrate that you actually care about what they're doing and that you can help them in some way, and you're not asking for anything, that's how friendships are made. Genuinely. Once you tap into that kind of world of influence, it really, really does help you. And I think these are things that people often get lost with. They might think, well, I can send that initial outreach message and maybe, we can have a little bit of back and forth for 24 hours and I don't see the point in it. Or I can write 3 blogs and then you just run out of steam. Like, you need to keep building this platform right at the start, which is why I said earlier in the show that it's very important for you, if you're thinking of starting a business, like set up that website 12 months before you actually launch anything. Start blogging, start putting content out there, start answering people's questions. Because once you build that foundation, it's so much easier for you and you'll move so much faster in the future that once you are starting to get noticed by people, you won't have to pay for people to come through the door and buy from you, or you'll have to pay a lot less than your competitors, let's say that. So I think that kind of mindset is very, very important for entrepreneurs. Like, you should be thinking about what you can do right now for very, very little money, or even for free, to really promote yourself. That's going to help you in 1 year, 2 years, be much, much further ahead than people who aren't doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in most respects, it's a virtuous cycle, at least from my experience, where, for example, you start a blog and then, yes, it can be hard to come up with ideas, but then after a few months or even a few weeks, or if you have a blog that's been sitting around, you hop on Search Console and you can see queries that people are typing into Google and that you might even already be kind of addressing, but now there's a new idea for another article or, stuff like that. With the podcast as well, once you hit a certain level of episodes, it becomes easier to then reach out to those people that, for example, I've had some guests where I felt I was, hitting above my weight, as they say in the boxing world. But because you have hey, I do have a podcast. We've got, in my case, 100 plus episodes. Are you interested in being on? And because, as you said earlier, podcasting is so popular, it's a great way to market yourself. And heck, people love talking about themselves. It's an easy way to start those conversations and those relationships. So anyways, I just wanted to jump on with some of those thoughts as well. Rob, this has been very helpful. I have 2 more questions. First one is totally selfish. What would you recommend for a podcaster like myself? We have the Solopreneur Grind podcast, been around for a couple of years now. Episode 119, I love it. I've had great guests. What would you recommend to me to take it to the next level?
Okay, I like this question. It feels like a question I would ask. So I actually had a look at your LinkedIn profile and your website before I came on, because I wondered if you might ask this kind of question. I would look at your previous guests, see who's doing big things or maybe bigger things now than they were when you spoke to them. If they've got a big following, reach out to them, find out if there's a way you can collaborate. Maybe they have a podcast that you can be on. I think, like, for you, and I'd say this for a lot of podcasters, because a lot of people start podcasts and don't realize how hard it is to monetize them, or how hard it is even to get like the right metrics and right data to know if it's working. So I think, like, keep an eye on the data for sure, like your downloads, obviously. But for me, if I was you, I would be starting to try and get myself on other people's podcasts, because it's the best way, right? Like, and this applies to any business, but people buy from people right at the start. They don't buy from a business. So yeah, if you're going to go and buy some new training shoes, yeah, you're going to buy from Nike, right? You're not going to buy from a guy down the street. Nike is a brand. But I think for small businesses, it's super important to not hide behind your branding or your logo or anything. And that's why podcasting is such a great way of getting the word out there. So you obviously have done really, really well. You've got a lot of episodes. You've got a great following. I would now start to think, well, maybe I could be on someone else's podcast a lot more often, or maybe I could start adding more blog content to my website to help other podcasters who maybe at episode 0 and they want to get to where I am. That kind of stuff is super important. And then, that kind of content is important because not only does it help people who come into your website, but maybe you can publish that on someone else's website, because, I might be interested in publishing that for us, because I think a lot of our readers might be interested in that kind of stuff as well. So I think basically, like, until you hit the Joe Rogan level of kind of downloads and Spotify contracts, I think you need to have that kind of hustle mindset constantly about, where can I get found? Where can I get the word out? And who's going to do that best for me right now. So I would look back at your old network and just go through that as a starting point. And then after that, maybe think about how you can get booked on other podcasts or write blog content that helps other podcasters. Does that make sense?
Great. Yeah, no, thank you. This was great advice. Rob, my last question that I like to ask pretty much all the guests is, what are 1 or 2 tips you would give to someone right now who's working a 9 to 5? If you can go back to put yourself back in old Rob's shoes, you're working the 9 to 5, there's something else out there, entrepreneurship, something. What are 1 or 2 pieces of advice you would give to them?
I mean, don't leave the 9 to 5 to start a restaurant overnight. That's crazy. In the most competitive restaurant market on earth, definitely don't do that. But I think seriously, if you are in a 9 to 5 now, and if you like it, stay there. Really, there's no need to upset the apple cart. The world is crazy right now in terms of inflation and everything else. This is maybe not a time to take crazy risks, but if you really are intent on starting your own business and starting something, I would really look at your bookshelf, or I would look at your podcast library, or I would look at the websites that you visit the most often that aren't, your daily news feed or whatever. Or if it is your daily news feed, like, what kind of news are you more interested in? What inspires you? That is very, very cheesy, but I could probably map my own entrepreneurial journey in books. I really could. I kind of know books that I picked up from a bookstore in maybe an airport when I was kind of like thinking about what to do or a little bit lost, and I've still got them. And like now and again, I'll go back to them. But like, I think you need to have that level of curiosity, but you need to not just be curious. You need to be looking at, okay, what am I curious about? And kind of thinking, stepping out of your own head a little bit and looking at what is it that I'm reading and why does that interest me? And what opportunities exist in that space and what things don't exist in that space that should. And then I think that will get you really kind of motoring down the path of entrepreneurship and just go for it. If you're really set on it, go for it.
I love it. One last additional quick question. What are 1 or 2 of your favorite books? Sounds like it might be hard to narrow down, but 1 or 2 quick recommendations.
Wow. So there are a lot. I really like Influence by Robert Cialdini. I think that's an amazing book. I think that is great for anyone who's going to sell anything or anyone who has ever been interested in why you buy things and you don't realize. You find out crazy stuff on there about why Tupperware as a business was one of the best business models ever. I didn't know some of the stuff that I read in there. That's a great book. I just read Deep Work by Cal Newport. I think that has changed the way that I not only work, but the way that I live my life. And I'm right now in the middle of reading 80/20 as well by, I think it's Richard Koch. I think the guy's name is Koch. That book, that one's valuable because it really makes you focus as a business owner on what's important. 80% of the value comes from 20% of your clients, or 20%, for you, definitely 80% of your downloads will come from 20% of your podcasts, your most popular podcasts. I would take a look at that and look at those stats. And if it's not 80/20, it might be 90/10. Definitely is for me on some of our content. So I think that book definitely is a game changer for the way that you think about the way you spend your time and what is valuable really deep down.
Awesome. Great. Rob, this has been very, very fun, very helpful, very entertaining, and yeah, certainly a lot of great advice. If anybody wants to get in touch with you or learn more about your business or follow you, where do you recommend they go?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. You just search Rob Barrett, and I guess that's going to be in the show notes. I won't need to spell that out for anybody. And if you'd like to take a look at the Industry Leaders website, or you're interested in getting published on there, getting your blog content on there, or having us book you onto podcasts, then come and take a look at theindustryleaders.org, and we will help you out.
Awesome. Rob, thanks again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Josh. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.